I want to welcome everybody to Flood Control Zone 9, our public meeting of June 16th, 2015. And just preliminarily, for those who have not been to one of these meetings before, and I do see some new faces, I see some, I won't say old faces, but I'll see some old friends here, that this advisory board were an advisory board to the County Board of Supervisors and actually the Marin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. And so we advise that district, which is made up of the Board of Supervisors, on flood control matters within our jurisdiction, which is roughly the Ross Valley. So we have a number of items to go through today. But why don't I just start off by introducing everybody, and maybe we'll go around so you all know who we are. And just to start, my name is Tom McInerney, and I'm on the San Anselmo Town Council, and I'm also chair of Flood Zone 9.
My name is Peter Hogg, and I'm an at-large member of the advisory board.
And I'm Sandy Gouldman. I'm also an at-large member.
Chris Martin, representing the town of Ross.
Rich Gumbiner, at-large from Kenfield.
David Weinsoff, town of Fairfax.
Great, and we'll be hearing reports from a number of staff members of the county. First off, though, I would like to make an introduction. We are pleased to have tonight the Director of Public Works for the County of Marin, Raul Rojas, is here, and I think to underscore the importance of this program for the county. But I want to welcome you, Raul, and welcome you to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Tom. Oh, is this on? Nope. Is it on now? No? How about now? All right. I'm not used to speaking that close to it. Okay. Well, we're all rooting for the Warriors, so I hope that goes well, and we have a closeout game tonight and a parade on Friday. Right. How's that sound? That sounds great. First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak and be in front of you today, and I want to thank the board here. You guys do a great job for us and a critical job in being our connection to the community and giving us input as to what we need to do and how to move forward with this project. I would say that this project is a legitimate or a real problem. Flooding is a real problem here and something that we have to solve and something that we can't fail at. We must do something. Whatever that is, we need to do something. We need to collaborate with the community. We need to hear their input. We need to make sure that we've heard everybody and that they are part of the process and they feel like they're part of the process so that at the end of the day, we have a great project. And that's what we all strive for and that's what we're here for. But most of all, we want to make sure that we do our due diligence and to protect the community as much as we can, because we know it's not a matter of if a flood will happen, it's a matter of when. I can't tell you when, but it will happen. And we want to make sure we've done everything we can. It was a devastating flood, the last one, and we want to make sure that we've done everything we can to try to prevent that and to protect our citizens as much as we can. And I can't underscore enough the importance of this project and moving forward and getting to the point where we feel like we've gotten all the input, everybody has felt like they've been part of the process, and that we have a great project moving forward, and I think that's what we're all striving for. You have a great presentation today. A lot of work has been done, both by the staff and by our consultant, and I look forward to the process. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the first item is just approval of our meeting minutes from our last meeting, which is May 20th. Is there
So moved?
Yeah.
Second.
Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on to item 2. It's open time for items not on the agenda. This is the opportunity for members of the public, if they would like to raise anything with the advisory board on items that are not on the agenda. So be sure to look at the agenda and just note if there's something on there, including discussions about different detention basin sites, that will be on that's coming up on the agenda. But if there's something else, you're welcome to come and comment at this time. Okay, seeing nothing, let's move on then to item 3, the draft flow reduction study presentation. I think we have First, turn it over to Scott Lyle.
I want to give an update on some of the correspondence that we've had this past week on the private properties that we've recommended in the flow reduction study. Per the advisory board last week, they asked us to document our past correspondence and how we've gone about notifying private properties. And that's listed in the staff report. There are 4 updates I'd like to give. Item 1 on the Sunnyside Nursery. We've had multiple conversations with Mr. Perry and feel that that site is still a viable site. Some kind of, probably not the concept that we've come up with right now, but some kind of compromise or something that would work with all the Perrys. So we're going to go forward with the Sunnyside Nursery site because we feel confident that there's a potential concept that we can do it in that location. For the San Domenico School, we've received a formal letter from the San Domenico School that has requested that we remove the site from further consideration. And so we will be doing that and removing the site from further consideration. That's both in any kind of implementation feasibility study and also the EIR documentation. So that site is stricken from the record. On the Camp Bothine site, I've actually had a discussion a couple of days ago with Dave Pook, the Senior Director of Property for the Girl Scouts of America in Northern California. David shared some concerns with the site that we had, the potential grading that we showed on Camp Bothine, and we discussed his concerns. There's some septic fills and other items that he had brought up. After discussing with Mr. Pook, we feel that we can address his concepts, his concerns on the site, and we'd like to keep the Camp Bothine site as still a potential alternative in the future. The last item is item 7, is the Ross Valley School District sites, and particularly Hidden Valley Elementary School, Brookside Elementary School, and Deer Park. We've had a recent discussion with the Ross Valley School District, and they would like us to do a presentation in August to discuss the concepts on those locations a little further before making any kind of commitment on including those sites both in the implementation plan phase and the EIR phase. So our recommendation would be to, as we get to the action items on these areas, we'd like to adjust what our recommendation would be for those sites going forward. At this time, that's all the updates on the correspondence. I think now it's time to, unless the board has any questions on that, I'd like to turn it over to Laura Harnish with CH2M Hill for the flow reduction study presentation.
Good evening. I know there's a lot of people here who would rather be somewhere else. We thought we were going to bring a basketball hoop, you know, and maybe do a few slam dunks, but we didn't have the insurance for that. So anyway, we're delighted to be here after a lot of work and many, many meetings. We feel like we're wrapping up the study, and I'm really eager to hear everyone's comments on that. I'm here today with Alan Turner, who's going to be giving part of this presentation, and Connie Gazaway, who will be available for Q&A. So today we're just going to do a quick overview of kind of the path that we've traveled to get to the recommendations. So we'll just do a quick overview of the flow reduction study process that we've been through. We'll talk about the findings of the alternative evaluation hydraulics analysis that's been done. We're going to show you the rankings of the proposed alternative configurations, which we've done before, and then we're going to talk about some recommendations and hear your questions and hopefully answer them. Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Now.
Yeah.
Better now, okay. It really is like being a rock star. All right. So just a quick overview of where we've been. This is the schedule. We had our first meeting in front of this advisory board March 17th, where we presented the draft selection criteria, the weighting factors, and the list of 27 flow reduction elements that we identified for consideration. We then came back after meeting with the TWIG in March. We came back in front of this board in April, where we presented the results of applying the fatal flaw criteria to the flow reduction elements and grouping the surviving elements into program alternatives. And then we met with the TWIG to show the draft results of that alternatives analysis, and now we've completed our full report. It's been posted on the website for about a week now with recommendations, conceptual plans, and cost estimates, and we're here to kind of present the summary of that today, which we did not know would be, the NBA final. So here's a quick overview of our process to date. Like I just said, we kicked this off with a review of the selection criteria that had been used to identify the initial 5 detention basins that were in the capital improvements plan. And then we developed a revised set of criteria based on a number of things, including a lot of comments and concerns that have been expressed by the community about the sites that have been selected. So we developed a much broader set of criteria. We identified 27 potential alternative flow reduction elements, many of those other detention basin sites, but also other types of elements to reduce flow other than detention basin sites. We then applied those criteria. There were 15 criteria with over 50 factors. We applied those to 32 elements, so the 27 new ones plus the 5 that were in the CIP. And then we took the best ranking of those and we assembled them into what we call program alternatives, because obviously no one site or element is going to solve this problem. It's going to take groupings of those, and you have to see how those perform as a group to understand what the program would be. So we created program alternatives. We did hydraulic and hydrologic evaluation of those, and then we ranked those based on the program selection criteria. So just a little review again of the criteria. We had 5 categories for criteria, 15 altogether. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them, all of the 15 and the 50 factors tonight, but they are in the report if you're interested in that level of detail. But we had one that was focused on reducing flooding potential, or a set of them on flooding potential, obviously very important. We had a set of criteria around environmental issues and providing environmental enhancement. So that's a secondary objective of the overall watershed program, so we knew that was an important set of criteria. Optimizing project costs and community economic costs, maximizing public benefit and minimizing public impacts, and optimizing implementation schedule. In these kinds of decision processes, those criteria are all important, but some are more important than others. And so, okay, you're not just giving me a thumbs up. You're just speak louder. Okay, so we assigned some weighting to these different criteria in order to reflect the relative importance of these different criteria. You can see the numbers to the right of how these criteria were weighted for each of them. So once we had applied all these criteria to the different elements, like I said, we assembled them into program alternatives with some assumptions. One was that the 160 stream improvement recommendations that are in the CIP would be built and implemented. And so analyzing the performance of these alternatives assumed that those improvements were in place, which have a significant contribution to overall flow reduction for Ross Valley. And then we grouped the highest ranked elements into various combinations that could meet the flow targets throughout the basin, which I'm going to show you in a minute, but they're also shown on these big boards in the back of the room. And there are 3 locations throughout the watershed where there are target flows, and so we were testing these program alternatives on their ability to meet those flows to reduce localized and overall flooding in the basin. And then we wanted to distribute that flow detention upstream of those key flooding locations and include the range of the top-ranked sites. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. This is really just a figure that describes the process that I just went over, but it's a flow chart that shows, that we initially applied these fatal flaw criteria to the full range of sites, and we eliminated a few sites based on these things, potential elements that could either endanger people, possibly make flooding worse, maybe had some fatal flaws as far as permitting. And then we ranked the remaining ones, applied the evaluation criteria. Again, we ranked them, and then we ranked and compared them. And that's where we are. So here is the This table shows you what the different alternatives are. Alternative 1, 2, and 3. It shows on the left the list of basins, or the list of detention basins and their ranking within the watersheds, or within the whole out of the 27. So we took the top performing ones, we grouped them by sub-watershed, and then you can see their storage capacity is listed there in the third column from the left. And then we arrayed them into 3 different alternative types. The first column there is the current CIP program. So you see X's next to Lefty Gomez, Loma Alta, Memorial Park, Red Hill Park, and Phoenix Lake, which are the 5 basins in the original CIP program, who together provide a storage capacity of 480 acre feet. We, in discussions with the technical working group, we elected to come up with program alternatives that had a target of greater than or equal to 525 acre feet of storage. And the reason for that is that there's an understanding that more storage is going to be better in this valley if we can get it. And that the creek improvements, while we're making the assumption they're going to be in place, they may also be difficult to acquire. So if while we're doing detention basins we can get more storage, we should try to do that. And so that was the goal in assembling this range of alternatives. So alternative 1, we chose the highest ranking elements in each sub-watershed. And that was Camp Bothine, the nursery near the nursery site, Deer Park, Memorial Park, and Phoenix Lake, for a total of 565 acre feet. And then alternative 2, we called the Sleepy Hollow option, which was designed to provide an option for San Anselmo that did not include Memorial Park, and also provided some storage that could relieve some of the localized flooding in the Sleepy Hollow watershed. So that included Camp Bothine, the nursery, San Dominica School, Deer Park, and Phoenix. Excuse me. And then the alternative 3, we created what we called the most environmentally friendly site, and picked those sites that performed the best according to the environmental criteria. Excuse me. So that was the nursery, Lefty Gomez, Deer Park, Memorial Park, and Phoenix Lake. So now I'm going to hand it to Alan Turner, who's going to go over the results of the analysis. This slide shows you the array of sites around Ross Valley. It's also over there and in the report, but I'll hand it to Alan now, who'll take you through the evaluation process and our findings.
Thank you, Laura. Again, my name is Alan Turner from CH2M Hill. So in terms of these alternative evaluations, we needed to understand how we're going to do the hydrologic analysis for this entire system. So basically, we used the Ross Valley watershed-wide HEC-HMS model that was developed by Stenson back in 2011. And it is calibrated to a flow event from the December 31st, 2005 flood, which is being used as an approximate surrogate for the 100-year flood event. And that was used for the design analysis. Each detention basin site was modeled independently on the front end to adjust the size and the performance characteristics of the outlet structures so that they performed and met the target flows as required. And then they were put together as one alternative in the model so that we could understand what the peak flow reduction was of all these facilities operating together at 3 gauges or 3 locations throughout the system. And this included the Fairfax Town Hall, San Anselmo upstream at the Sycamore Bridge, and then again at the Ross USGS gauge. So to talk a little bit about the maximum target flows, when the original CIP project was completed, and again, keep in mind that this includes the 160 stream improvements throughout the basin, but these flows that are up on the screen are really what needed to be achieved to get a 100-year containment of the flow in the entire system. One of the most important of those is at the downstream end at the gauge at Ross, where we have a target flow of 5,540 CFS. That flow is required by the USGS project in the downstream direction, and it was one of the major goals that we needed to hit in terms of providing detention and meeting the capacity of that system through Port Madera. The second gauge system is in San Anselmo itself. To prevent flooding through San Anselmo, we need to hit a flow rate of 4,540 CFS. And again, for the town of Fairfax, we're looking at 1,110, and this is sort of upstream of San Anselmo Creek before it enters the culvert that discharges into San Anselmo. And again, these flows were developed under the assumption that the 160 stream improvements are in place. So with alternative one, with the hydrologic analysis, you can see the target flow reductions up on the screen. And the basins were selected for each of the alternatives so they could address each one of these target flow locations. So we really needed 2 facilities above the town of Fairfax to try and get the flow rates down to the right level. And with alternative one, we got the flow rates down to 1,170 CFS, and the target's about 1,110. So it's not exactly there, but we do have some flexibility in terms of looking at these sites, and at sort of the level that the model is built at and the level at which we're currently at design. You can basically assume that 60 CFS difference is about the same in terms of where we're at today. As we move in the downstream direction with this one, we were able to get the residual flow down to 4,470 at Ross, and we're meeting the flow goals the flow goals at Ross, and we managed to get down to 4,470 in San Anselmo. So we're meeting the flow targets downstream for the remainder of the system. Again, with alternative two, you see a similar result with the gauge up in Fairfax of about 1,170 again. Where we're at with today's analysis, that can be considered pretty much meeting that goal. Downstream direction in San Anselmo, 4,470. And again, we're meeting the flow goals for the USGS, the Army Corps project in Port Madera. And finally, the most environmentally friendly one, because of the size of the detention basins in the upstream area, we were able to reduce that target flow for the city of Fairfax down to 1,010 CFS. So we're meeting the flow goals in Fairfax with this alternative. For San Anselmo, we're at 4,310, and again, 5,310 through Ross, meeting the goals in the downstream direction. This is just another way of kind of looking at that same information, and generally speaking, all 3 of these alternatives that we put together do meet the flow goals and achieve what we need to in terms of flood protection for the valley. So what we ended up doing once we had the hydraulic analysis was taking these alternatives and going back through the 50 rating criteria to understand which one of these shook out as a preferred or a best alternative in terms of the way things look. And you can see up here that basically the most environmentally friendly one ranked number 1. It met the flow goals, and it had large amounts of detention, some flexibility in terms of design, in terms of reducing potential in-stream channel improvements, as well as reducing potentially the size of other basins in the system. So being that it met the goals and had the most flexibility, we did end up ranking that 1. The highest ranking elements came in as 2. The Sleepy Hollow option came in as 3. And the current CIP project came in at a ranking of 4. And again, this is just another way of looking at that same information in terms of alternative 3 was ranked the highest, alternative 1 ended up being 2nd, alternative 2 3rd, and the current CIP project came in at 4th. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura to give recommendations.
Thank you. So we, given those findings, we put some thought into what would be recommendation for going forward, knowing that there's a number of sites, there's still some unknowns. We tried to know as many of those unknowns as we could, but there remain uncertainties about the implementability of a number of these sites, of course, until you go further in terms of engineering feasibility and talking to landowners, there's some unknowns. So we opted to to develop a two-pronged approach that gives the county as much flexibility while still providing you with some momentum going forward and having an implementation strategy and an EIR strategy. So for the implementation strategy, we wanted to, we thought that would be to direct staff to pursue the sites identified in Alternative 3. That's the alternative that ranked the highest. So that includes the former nursery site, Lefty Gomez, Memorial Park, Deer Park, and Phoenix Lake. And then for the PEIR strategy, you not narrow your options. You continue to carry the top sites forward for program evaluation. And that protects the county in the event that any of the sites in Alternative 3 encounter roadblocks. And it could be any one of those, and provides the flexibility to lead agencies to pursue sites in addition or in place of those. So just to look at that a little more in a table format, I guess the drought is getting to me. Where the green arrows are the sites that are included in Alternative 3. So those would be the ones that we would recommend proceeding with. The other sites we would recommend carrying forward into the PEIR so that you have the option, without going back and redoing the EIR, to include them, for further study. And we've highlighted San Domenico here in yellow, as Scott mentioned earlier. This one would be off the table now, as we understand from that landowner. So we would be recommending, continuing to pursue the sites with the green arrows, and then but carrying these other ones, Camp Bothine, Loma Alta, Red Hill, Hidden Valley, and Brookside, forward into the PEIR. So you have sort of backup sites. It's not, because it's at a program level, it's not a lot more costly to include these sites going forward at that program level. If you decide, to bring one to the fore, you have that option. You can do a tiered project level document on any of the sites in here without going back and reopening that CEQA process, which I think would save you a lot of money potentially if that's what occurs. So we also developed some cost estimates, and that's what's on this slide here. And I want to stress that these estimates are at different levels of detail because we have different amounts of information about these different sites. So the more information you know about a site, the more detailed of a cost estimate you can do, and generally the more expensive the site seems to get. So they're really developed here for comparison purposes only, not for budgeting or fiscal planning. So you can see across the top, we put in the current CIP, which is 480 acre-feet of detention with an estimated cost of $47.3 million. The top ranking sites with 565 acre-feet of detention at 60.5, and Alternative 3, which gives you the most detention, 601 acre-feet at 59.1. So I think the next steps, and Scott can go into more detail on this, is really to hear public comment tonight and probably on the website for some period of time, and then we would finalize the report.
Can I ask one question? Let me ask one question, because a few times, Laura, you mentioned we recommend we move forward with certain things. Can you discuss what you mean by that? I assume you don't mean we're recommending that we begin construction on these different projects.
No.
Can you describe a little more? We've talked about it at other meetings, but there may be folks here who weren't at some of our
Sure. By moving forward, I mean with the planning studies. So that includes a number of things like geotechnical investigations, biological surveys, more hydrologic analysis, discussions with permitting agencies to determine whether there's some fatal flaws. In areas where there maybe haven't been neighborhood community meetings about particular sites, there would probably need to be some neighborhood meetings to understand very local concerns, that kind of thing.
Okay. Did you have more?
Connie wants to add.
Yeah.
I would just add to that as well, is optimizing these sites. When we developed the conceptual designs that are in the Appendix B of the report, those were a very first cut, and they were to see what was the maximum that we could store and what would be the cost for that. That does not mean, and I want to emphasize this, that does not mean That's the design of the facility that's going forward. Because we have to optimize those. They may get smaller, the shape and configuration may change. So we just want everybody to be aware of that. That would be part of the process as we go forward.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add on Phoenix Lake and Lefty Gomez Field, we've actually already proceeded with the feasibility studies on those two sites. So the Deer Park would be something that we start from scratch and start the communication efforts with the school district.
Okay, it's now time for questions from the board. Okay, so how this will work for everybody, the board will ask questions on this item, and then we'll open it up for public comment at that time. So, questions from the board. David.
Quick one on the Deer Park. A little concern for those of us who can recall the '05 flood. Around the corner from the Deer Park site on Wood Lane, a big swath of hill liquefacted, took the house out, took a couple of cars, moved them across the street, and after the bulldozers worked for many hours, they were able to clear the road. It was astounding that nobody lost their lives in any of those homes. So my initial concern when I look at this, and I take the measure of your excellent comment that it's just a conversation starter and that we will investigate hydrologic and other issues. But I would just present for consideration here, just on a safety concern, that hillside has some problems. And it's evidenced those problems in the prior flood. So as we go forward with these, while not prejudging it here tonight, we would want to be mindful of the situation that occurred there on that terrible day.
Yeah. Anything you got, Sandy?
Yeah.
It's up here.
I'm a microphone novice. Deer Park, if you look at the parcel map, is just a tiny little inholding embedded in MMWD lands. Is there any flexibility about moving that upstream so that it's not on school property if there's resistance to working with the school? Or resistance from the school?
So the answer to that is yes, there would be some flexibility in doing that. Unfortunately, as you start moving further and further upstream, in that parcel, it's a little odd because there's parkland on one side and then there's the school on the other. But if you move upstream and you sort of get away from the existing field that's there, you're going to lose quite a bit of storage.
Okay.
And so you're going to end up having to go up rather than sort of using that existing flat area for that storage. So it's always a possibility, but it would definitely reduce storage. But again, it would be one of those things that we'd have to discuss moving forward, you know, with those property owners and understand what that meant for the entirety of the project program.
Other questions, Chris?
Yes. Could you comment a little bit about the next steps, the timing, the length of time that it would take to more thoroughly evaluate these sites and come out with a firm recommendation on how we proceed, and also the costs associated with that? Obviously, we want to implement the improvements as soon as possible, and that's a vital concern.
Alan, I can answer that, don't worry. Yeah, we actually looked into that, Chris, and we did a little estimate based on our previous work on Lefty, and based on our estimate, best case, it probably takes us about 18 months to get into a grant-ready state, from initial discussions with the owner and just starting those discussions, and the geotechnical analysis that needs to be done, the biological assessment, the benefit cost calculation. So that's about an 18-month period. And looking at the costs that we had with the consultants and staff time, I'd say probably about a $350,000 estimate for kind of an average estimate to get a site up to grant-ready status.
But meanwhile, Phoenix Lake and some of the other projects that we've proceeded on will continue, correct?
That's correct. Phoenix Lake and Lefty Gomez, we've actually completed those types of studies. Our next step on Lefty Gomez is to sit down with the school district and get a memo of understanding together to move to the environmental phase, and we're busily looking for grants right now, so.
I know I'm the biggest thorn in your side, and I appreciate the fact that you continuously are so nice in response. But I have to return to this thing. When you say 18 months, I really would like to know, if we gave you more money, would you do it in less than 18 months? Because the issue that I would really like to know is, and I'm not being snarky here, imagine you live beneath the floodwaters or in the flood zone. You would want your government to do everything as fast as it could, leaving no stone unturned to get this done as quickly as possible. So when I hear that it takes 18 months to do ministerial stuff, I think about having to walk to those members of the community and explain this to them. And for the life of me, I can't do that. So if it is a resources question, please come to us, and hopefully we could look into the budget and pry money out to lubricate this so that you can move much more quickly than 18 months on this. And also on the Lefty Gomez thing, I would really, and I asked this last time, I really want to know, and I volunteered to join you in a conversation with the good school board over there to sort of, bring them back into the process, because I know that they are well aware of the problem, and so that we can move that one, like Phoenix, forward as quickly as possible. 2 questions.
I didn't hear the first question, but I can answer the second question. We're meeting.
The first question was, if we gave you more money, would you do it faster?
The information I provided was based on one site, so it'd be dependent on who the owner is and how quickly we can establish those memorandums of understanding. The actual work, geotechnical work, biological assessment work, they're tied to seasons, so that work would be dependent on when we started the work. But anything's possible, David. Second question, we're actually meeting with the board in August, and we'll be presenting Lefty along with the other sites that we presented today, and hopefully getting that memo of understanding, get that in front of them shortly after that, so we can begin the environmental document phase. And again, we've been looking for grants for a while, and we'll continue that search.
Without taking up everybody else's time, one of the issues that we raised last time was this grant world is hit and miss. Sometimes you get lucky, as you did with Phoenix, as you did with Memorial Park, but the world can't wait for that. People have paid into the fee. The county has interesting dynamics with regard to borrowing. If we can't get the grant, like we see from, in Caltrans with the replacement of the bridge, they have their reasons for not being able to fund the replacement of that bridge for some years down the road. Fair enough. Can we access our own money, use our own fee money to leverage borrowing so that we can get these darn projects done? When you flipped your stuff up the last time, what we saw was you were estimating completion around the end of 2020, if I recall correctly. And that's a goodly bit of time down the road. Again, I really want to move you guys to begin to think, what can we do to chip time off of that 5-year period? What is it that will do that? Sitting around waiting for other folks to make decisions about, who have other priorities, about our funding problem just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. So thinking out a little outside of the box, creatively, what can we do to squish that period down? And I'm more than happy again. I'm not going anywhere in August. I'll be there at that meeting if you want me there.
Hey, Scott.
Thanks,
Scott.
Yeah.
If I may, can I help answer this question? Actually, David, I really appreciate your question. And I think it's a very valid one, and it's a frustration that I know the public sometimes sees. What takes so long? Why is government so slow sometimes? And as an engineer, I just want to build something. Give me a spot, and I'm going to go build it. And so I think we can get back to you on that question. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm going to solve it for you, because there are dynamics that may not be able to do it. Can you leverage money? Can you borrow against your fee? Yes, you can. There are certain things that may happen afterwards that you may not like, because we'll bond and debt part of that fee which means we may not go forward on other projects. But it's a decision that can be before you, at least. In other words, you can say yes or no to that decision. But yes, you can bond against that, and it's possible. Will funding make us go faster? In certain segments of a project, it will. In the very, very early stages, when we have to go through in the environmental process, not as much, because the environmental process in California makes us go at a certain pace, and because of the biologicals have to happen in seasons, we tend to have to go through a whole year for those things to happen. And that's part of the process. So it's easy when we get to design, because then it's design construction and it happens fast. The setup part, the soft cost part, a little more difficult. But yes, it would help if we had funding. It would make us go faster. Also having a owner or a property owner that is part of the process and willing to go forward, and it would help push the environmental faster. That's true. But we can only go so fast in the environmental process.
Again, I don't want to take everybody's time up, but my line of sight is Spotswood from the IJ. Wrote a number of pieces on, really, we can't restripe a lane on a bridge to get people to move faster. The same argument applies here. What does it take to creatively not think as we always do? And I've been a council member for coming up on 10 years. I get the slowness and the sort of, at times, wisdom of being deliberate. But 10 years after the flood, I know we had litigation that held it up and all that sort of stuff. The people's patience has long passed on this. And so what I'm urging government to do is not think of the way it always thinks, but to think in a different way. And however that occurs, whether it's on the shoulders of the electeds and on the shoulders of staff, to look around at other models and come up with a different path, because I don't even want to think about what happens if there should be flooding before we get this stuff in. That will be a pronounced failure of government. And as an elected, failure of government is not good government. Not when you have made promises to the public, when you ask them for their tax and fee dollars, when you expect them to trust you to make decisions day in and day out on matters large and small. So I'm asking you to think not as we always do, but to come up with something that's going to shrink that time frame substantially.
I heard message loud and clear, and I share all of your frustrations. I share what your thought process is. I clearly believe in that. I wish I had better answers for you. However, your question is valid, and we need to come back to you with some suggestions on what we could do. The board may or may not like them, and you may not approve them, but I think it's a valid question, and I share everything that you've said. I wish we could move faster. There was a time back in my earlier career that it was design, build, and there was very little public process. It was just blow and go. That is no longer an acceptable process. We want our community to be part of that process. And it's just part of how life is today. But that's no excuse, because I think your point is valid, and we should give you some options and some thought into this, and I believe in that. So we'll give it some thought. Okay?
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a few. One, make sure, is this on? On we've heard how San Domenico has indicated they're not interested in participating. I guess a question is, I understand staff has had outreach to all the other property owners. Some, it sounds like, have been more kind of positive. Some are more with questions and the like. First off, I would just want to make sure that we are fully confident that we are speaking to and are getting the input and the decision from the actual legal decision makers. So that might even be with Sunnyside Nursery. I understand there's discussions with Tom Perry. Just want to make sure that if we agree to go forward and include them in this, before we do that, we have clear something in writing, preferably from the if Tom Perry's the legal owner of that property, great. If there's another family member out there that disagrees, I don't want that to come back and after we spent a lot of time. So just want to make sure that also goes with the Ross Valley School Board. It's great that we're meeting with them. I'll just follow up on David's comments. I think a number of us have good relations with that board. I know there are other folks that are here, including the Mayor of San Anselmo, John Wright, who's a former Ross Valley School Board member. It would be, I think, useful when we schedule that meeting that we make sure we have advanced knowledge on that, and because a number of us, I think, would like to go and maybe help with the communication and discussion about the importance of this project. Some of these other ones, too, that we're talking about in it, I mean, Deer Park, I have questions about it just because of the notoriety of that site over the years for various things, and I would want to make sure that before we launch into a potentially kind of lengthy, costly EIR process related to that, we are confident that the school district and/or MMWD, that's an interesting suggestion, if the school board isn't on board, whether there's a way to do it with MMWD and whether or not we have MMWD board support for participating in this process. I mean, does that sound reasonable, Scott?
That sounds very reasonable. Yes.
Okay. Now, a question I had about the programmatic EIR, and I think Laura, you mentioned this. I just want to make sure I understand. And I'll just lay the context. There's been some frustration, understandable and reasonable frustration in San Anselmo with respect in part to Memorial Park, where, as we all know, there's an initiative that's been circulated with people that have taken what were kind of the drawings, schematic drawings as part of the grant process that anticipated maximum detention and had some impacts based on the schematic drawing on some of the amenities in the park, and they've told people that this is happening, you're gonna lose your playground or your ball fields, et cetera. So there's been frustration because, as you've indicated, part of this process may lead to less detention or a different design or something like that, but people aren't able to conceptualize that. And are we able to, as the lead agency, we, San Anselmo, as being the lead agency for that, during this, if we were to take this step and approve the staff recommendation here, would we be able to go beyond those drawings that were done as part of a grant process now and put together some potential options, schematic options, for possibly, let's say, less detention or some other options for Memorial Park so the public can see that?
Absolutely. That's the short answer. But I imagine that the programmatic EIR, as far as the detention basins go, is going to give, except for Phoenix Lake, which will be handled at a project level, so there'll be details. But for all the other detention basins, there's going to be a very generic description of what the facility would be like, because it hasn't been designed yet. Those drawings that you're referring to about Memorial were conceptual in nature. They were not real plans at all. And so I think there's a whole process that San Anselmo is embarking on now to go the next step and start to really develop some designs. But in the programmatic EIR, I think we would probably show, that there could be a range of detention in each of these detention basins that could hold, a range of amounts of water and be in different configurations on the site depending on what the local lead agency decides they want to do.
Okay, and so then maybe, and Scott, this may be, and yes, sorry, you had something else to add. Yeah.
As the engineer that often works on these, we work really closely with the environmental consultant. We often take the approach of the worst case condition in the environmental document. You can always get smaller and you can always have less impacts, and that will be okay with the regulators, but you can't get bigger. So often the approach is start out with the worst impacts or the largest footprint and identify that and evaluate that. And then as the project moves along and you optimize the size and you downsize it and your footprint gets smaller, it falls under the realm of what has already been approved.
Okay. So to get to a practical standpoint on this with respect to additional drawings, what would it take for us, for San Anselmo and/or working in conjunction with the county to come up with some additional options with respect to some schematic drawings? What would we need to do?
I think we have a couple options. The one option that Laura was mentioning is part of the programmatic EIR. We could look at preparing some concept plans. We'll be going to the board shortly for the programmatic EIR/project EIR contract with CH2M Hill, and we could make that a part of the work.
How long would that take, though?
Tom, are you specifically asking about Memorial Park?
Yes, Memorial Park at this point.
Well, that's the process that San Anselmo is doing right now. So and Sean's here, so I don't know if Sean wants to address those
So with
questions, but that's different, you're talking about a different level of detail for Memorial.
All I want to know is it possible now, as part of, is there any limitation on San Anselmo or any of the other lead agencies that are working under the programmatic EIR to begin a process for coming up or examining possible options?
No, there's no limitation on
Okay, all right.
on that.
Okay. And when we talk about a programmatic EIR, can you go over again, Laura, what the expected time frame may be? When would members of the public have an understanding, or when would this process start or anticipated to start, and when would it be anticipated to end?
So we're anticipating, I'm going to look over to Russ and Scott to nod here, but because it's a combined program project EIR and the project is Phoenix Lake, we will not be able to complete the program EIR until we have the project level details on Phoenix Lake. So right now, that's anticipated that the feasibility study would be done towards the end of this year, and some conceptual design at the beginning of next year. So our strategy right now to keep that on as fast a track as possible is to start the programmatic evaluation as soon as possible. So, as soon as we can get a contract approved, essentially. So we're looking at the fall for that in terms of timing. And then we would get the program evaluation done so that as soon as we have the Phoenix information, we can get that done. And then I think we'd be looking at probably the end of next year for an EIR, or next fall, 2016 fall, for a draft programmatic EIR to be available for review.
Okay. Unless Mr. Rojas is able to make some magic and expedite everything, so.
Well, to be honest, the bottleneck there with Phoenix Lake is working with the Division of Safety of Dams. So your local county folks are working as hard as they can, and with the project at Phoenix Lake, and this will be true of all the detention basins. You have to work with the Division of Safety of Dams. I mean, if you're in their jurisdiction, which many of these may be. Phoenix Lake certainly is. So they have to approve the geotechnical investigation. They have to, what are you looking at? They have to review the results of that. They want a lot of influence on the feasibility study and the conceptual design. So, and they have review cycles, and so we're working. We'll be working as hard as we can to fast track that. But that'll be the bottleneck.
Great. Okay. Any other questions from board members? If not, then at this time, I'd thank you, Laura. I'd like to open it up for public comment on this item. Members of the public can comment on this one, and I have approximately 3 minutes, although I'm generally fairly lenient. Want to welcome former Supervisor Gary Giacomini. Welcome.
Board members, it's indeed a pleasure. Is this working?
I think so, yeah. You got to speak closely to it.
Yeah, I'm getting older. What's the score, by the way?
Plug your.
Okay. Anyway, what I want.
It's good though.
I'm privileged to be the lawyer representing San Domenico, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman and Supervisor Rice, and the staff, Scott, for listening to the pleas that we advanced in my letter, which you probably all have copies of. We are not being obstinate. We support the project as such. We don't support it on San Domenico's land. We have only 36 acres available for the campus. The rest is open space, et cetera. And this lake that you were going to do would have taken up 6 acres, right next to some dormitories, et cetera. So it would have been a really, really bad threat to the campus and to some of the Sleepy Hollow homes. But I want to thank you very, very much for your receptivity. And we support what you're doing, the overall project. I want you to understand that. We are not obstinate to the project. And this will make it faster and cleaner, and we won't be bothering you. And again, I want to thank you very, very much. Scott, thank you for your receptivity. And I want to introduce Cecily Stock, who's right here. She's the head of school. And one of our great board members, Amy Skews Cox, is right here. She's one of our best board members, and they likewise. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. Steve Lamb, San Anselmo. I have a question from the staff report on page 2. There's a paragraph starting with Stetson Engineers. And near the end of that paragraph, it says, the district will collect public comments during the 2-week review period beginning on June 9 and ending on June 16. And that's not 2 weeks. So I wonder if we could get clarification of that.
Do you want me to, you want to first, Scott? Do you want to?
I'll admit that it was an error on the staff's part. Originally, we thought we would have a 2-week period, and we would have a meeting in July. We have changed that to a 1-week period, and this little error was not caught. But I want to make sure that people understand that we will extend it now to the 2-week period, knowing that we were going to be going to the board in August, and we'll be collecting comments during that 2-week period. So June 23rd would be, we'll still be accepting comments, knowing that we still have work to do to verify other sites.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Wilson. I live in the Morningside Meadowcroft flood area. I actually have 2 questions and then 1 comment. What percentage of downtown San Anselmo flooding comes from the Sleepy Hollow Creek versus the creek that runs through Memorial Park, which you can't even see?
Are you, well, why don't you get at the rest of your, see if we can answer them. Yeah.
Well, that's a critical question.
Okay.
Because with San Domenico off the table, which I'm very sad about because that would have protected our neighborhood, and Stanford has a beautiful running track around the lake as a model that might have worked. I'm curious if the Hidden Valley Elementary School and Brookside Elementary School are on the Sleepy Hollow Creek, because I'm not sure whether any of the other options actually address a huge creek that contributes, I would say, the majority of the water that flows into flooding downtown San Anselmo, which is no longer even addressed now that San Domenico said no. So those are my 2 questions.
Okay. So are you able to address this or get back to Mrs. Wilson?
Unless Ellen has an answer, I'll have to get back to you on the percentages of Sleepy Hollow Creek representing the entire watershed. Can I ask a question, though? We didn't quite get your full name, so we want to make sure we document that.
Okay, it's Lucy Wilson.
Lucy Wilson.
I would have to say that a lot of the people who are against the Memorial Park, it's a creek, it's a retention basin for a creek that nobody can even see until it goes downstream. But so having the percentage of the water that is contributed to the biggest flooded area identified by creek and how much these different areas would stop, what percentage of the water would be something that, you know, you could say, oh, well, that makes sense, because right now there's like no apparent logic. Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks. John Wright, San Anselmo Town Council. I should take pains to note that I'm only speaking for myself, since all the members of the San Anselmo Town Council are here tonight. I'm just speaking for myself. Tom mentioned we have a bit of drama in San Anselmo right now. As you're well aware, there's an initiative to eliminate Memorial Park from consideration as a dual-use facility. Yesterday, we received petitions with over 1,600 signatures, well more than needed to qualify. Indications are at this point the initiative will qualify once the signatures are verified, and the town council is going to be required to put it on the November ballot unless the council votes to adopt the initiative as an ordinance amending our general plan prior to the early August deadline for the November ballot. The group supporting the initiative includes 2 former long-term council members, a current council member, and a recent council candidate. I have no doubt that there will be a very active campaign for this initiative. As you may know, 4 of the 5 town council members voted to oppose the initiative at our June 9th town council meeting. The same council members directed our town staff to return to our June 23rd meeting with the outline of a ballot measure that would require the town to hold a public vote in the future on an alternative plan. This is still being analyzed, but my assumption at this point is these measures would be mutually exclusive, and if both are on the ballot, the one that wins the most votes would negate the other. The proposed council ballot measure is an effort to gain more time so that a proper planning process can occur at which other alternatives can be looked at for Memorial Park. In my opinion, a competing council member, should we agree on one, council measure, should we agree on one, would be unlikely to prevail unless it's clear to the voters that there can still be a compromise plan that would substantially preserve the recreational features of Memorial Park while still allowing an acceptable level of floodwater detention. One of the main reasons why the initiative seems to be gaining so much support is there's no compromise plan on the table, nor has one ever been put forward by Flood Zone 9 or the town itself. Moreover, even the current proposal lacks a good visual depiction of the facility, and initiative supporters have been easily able to put forth a worst-case scenario in which the recreational uses of the park are significantly cut back. As the town council evaluates its options over the next few weeks, we'll be looking for a signal from the Flood Zone 9 board and the county that a compromise on Memorial Park would be possible. One concrete step that could be taken would be to direct county staff and CH2M Hill very soon to prepare an alternative dual-use plan with less detention at Memorial Park that would include a visual depiction of what such a facility would look like, could look like. The board could also consider taking Memorial out of the first stages of the project plan in favor of some of the alternative detention plan locations that have less local community impact, so as to allow more time for our community to evaluate an alternative. These are steps that I believe could help dispel the incorrect but understandable perception among some in our community that the Memorial Park plan is a done deal that can't be changed unless it is completely derailed by this initiative. I believe that a majority of our council wants to see an effective flood control plan that benefits our town and the entire Ross Valley, even if that means some sacrifices in our community. But we need your help to try to convince our community to remain patient and that a compromise is possible. Thank you.
We don't meet again until September 21st.
I realize that, so
We may meet
You may
earlier.
want to meet
We may
again.
talk about meeting sooner.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have an initiative in front of us, so
Yeah.
it's help us.
Peter, did you have something?
John, you made a statement there that there had been no alternatives considered. I thought I had seen some drawings that Sean had done, your Public Works Director, of alternative layouts to Memorial Park.
No, I think there have been discussed, I know that, and that's why I think we need more formalized. What Peter's referring to, I think, is one of the consultants who submitted plans for the response to our RFQ for this CEQA process
Right.
had proposed some with less detention, and that's
Yeah.
something which maintains all the amenities and the
Yeah.
like. So it is definitely possible.
It's possible.
to do
We just haven't seen that anywhere in the,
Yeah.
public domain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen Lipinski, San Anselmo. I have 2 questions. One is, could you elaborate on why the Pine Mountain Tunnel was taken off the table? And the second question is, can you elaborate on the price discrepancy between all the other proposed detention basins and Memorial Park? Thank you.
Thank you. Are we able to address the Pine Mountain one? Is that something, yeah, you folks?
So when we looked at Pine Mountain Tunnel, one of the things that we used pretty heavily in terms of analyzing what was going on with that tunnel specifically was a report by HDR in terms of changing that tunnel into a potential recreational bypass up in that area. Currently, the tunnel's in very, very bad shape. Actually, close to collapse in a lot of cases. So one of the reasons, as we were looking at it in terms of, one of the reasons why it came off the system was the expense of shoring that up to make it hold water. Second issue with it being a small pipe is it just didn't hold all that much water in terms of a storage option. It's a siphon that moves back and forth from the lake on the other side of the divide. It would have to be blocked off, and the amount of storage within that tunnel itself was relatively small and did not provide a large amount of impact. So the construction rehabilitation of that site was going to be extremely expensive for essentially little benefit to the broader valley, so it was taken off the system.
Okay, great. Is there any further public comment?
I'd like to, Matt Brown, San Anselmo. I'd like to follow up on 2 questions. Can you quantify what is too expensive and how much quantity?
Matt, I'm sorry, Matt, why don't you direct questions to the board and then we can direct them to the staff. This isn't a question to the board. So do you have a question?
Yes, Tom. How much detention could be held in the tunnel and how much is too expensive to rehabilitate?
Okay. So are you able to address, are you able to address that?
The details of the analysis of all the 32 elements that we evaluated actually, I think, are provided online. We actually did come up with a conceptual cost. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is available for the Pine Mountain Tunnel. We also had an estimate of what the total storage would be. And as I recall, it was less than 10 acre-feet. And the rest of our system, you can see, we're in the neighborhood of 50, 60, 80. So the amount of water that it could actually hold compared to the other detention basins, it scored very, very low on category A, which is the hydraulic, reducing the flow potential downstream. So going through the process that we outlined today, we applied 50 different factors to all 32, and Pine Mountain scored at the bottom of the list as compared to the rest of these.
Okay, great, thanks.
I'm Brent Davis from San Anselmo. This is only the second meeting I've attended, so maybe this has already been covered, but I want to acknowledge, this has been very, very thorough tonight and very interesting. One of the first slides said there was 160 downstream improvements that had to be made. Is this going to happen? Or are they in the process of being made, or are they being taken care of?
Okay, so the question, and maybe if staff can address, it's a good question. There's talking about 160 different channel improvements that would have to be made as part. I think a lot of the assumptions assume that those were made. What happens if some of those don't happen? What is the impact on the overall program? Or do we, if like one of them or 10 of them don't happen, what happens to the recommendations here?
Yeah, so as far as the in-stream channel creek measures, right now we're actually working on some of them. That includes the Units 3 and 4 project, which is the most downstream portion of the channel improvement projects. And that is the most critical part of the stream reach. Channel improvements would have to be performed in a downstream to upstream measure to mitigate any potential impacts from increased flow conveyance. And as you know, our funds right now, the flood zone 9 feed funds, are limited to the 13 baseline measures, which are identified as part of the 10-year work plan and to provide that 25-year level flood protection. Once we incorporate those measures, then we start looking at the other stream creek measures. Okay. Each of those projects, as they implement, say, a bridge project, Unit 3, Unit 4 project, upstream and downstream impacts are looked at for multiple storm events. So we look at 5-year, 10-year, 100-year storm events to assess those impacts.
Well, let me just follow up on that and maybe direct it to Laura or her team, but we are assuming that all these improvements will occur, I think we can also reasonably assume some will not occur for one reason or another. How is that, do we factor that into the analysis and the prioritization? Any kind of assumptions that certain in-channel improvements will not happen? And what happens with the analysis when some things don't happen?
For purposes of this particular study, our task was to find elements that would reduce the flow and meet the targets at the 3 locations, and specifically to meet the maximum capacity at the Unit 4 project. So there are several elements that we did evaluate, things like bypass culverts, widening the channel. Those elements, we think should be maybe considered in the future to replace some of the 160 elements that have been identified. So as it moves forward, if you find some of the 160 elements are not able to achieve, there are some other items that you can look at as a backup. But for purposes of this analysis, we just assumed that was part of the baseline so we could compare the alternatives and how they performed for these 32 elements.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Lisa Stanfley Torme. I live on Morningside Drive, and I flooded in 1982 and 2005, and I was very glad to see my neighbor here today talking to you about it. Someone just handed me the San Domenico letter, and I have to say, you guys blew it. Shame on you. You really, really blew it. The letter clearly says you didn't make the ask. I came to your meeting last month, and the direction from this board was very clear. You make the ask. You find out where the landlords are on this position. You didn't make the ask. You really upset their board. You really upset their head of school. You really upset their lawyer, who's a former supervisor, and he's hitting you with a hammer on the head with his letter saying, go away. You didn't ask. He describes in his letter a 40-foot concrete wall. Where did he come up with that? Is this worst case scenario? I also sat here exactly 1 year ago talking to you about Morningside Drive, and I asked you why there were no monies in the first phase that would do anything to protect our neighborhood. We're unfunded. The other projects are funded, but we're unfunded. We have multiple and repeat flooding in our area, and oftentimes out of banks at Morningside before out of banks anywhere else. So shame on you. They're not listening to you. They need to listen to you, and they need to follow your instructions, because maybe that situation with San Domenico could have turned out differently. I also read the last paragraph of that letter, and it seemed pretty open to talking. I suggest you get back on the phones and you start talking to people, because you're not doing anything for us. Now, our family, and to my knowledge, no one in my neighborhood joined the class action lawsuit that was filed by Larry Mann, which the town lost and had to pay against for liability for flooding in people's homes and businesses. No one in my neighborhood joined that class action, but it just might happen if you don't get busy and start doing something for us too. If the best we can get is 25-year flood protection, that is not good enough. I want you to hear me. That is not good enough.
Thank you.
Hi, Doug Kelly, San Anselmo Town Council. There's been some confusion, and one of the reasons I think the initiative moving forward with the submission this afternoon or yesterday was there's some confusion about how much water is being held by the Memorial Park detention facility. Have you confirmed that it's 80 acre-feet, which is in excess of 26 million gallons? And is it 2 inches or is it 2 feet? The other thing is, I wanted to ask, isn't it also true to answer, if you could answer Kathleen Lipinski's question, isn't Memorial Park more expensive because about $3 to $4 million would be dedicated to recreation facilities?
Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead. Yeah.
Eric Cutter, San Anselmo. I was wondering if you could elaborate. I'm reading through the document. I see Loma Alta, which scored lower than all of the schools in Morningside, and the Marin Stables is on the recommended list, but those are not. And I couldn't see in the document why Loma Alta made the cut and the other ones didn't.
Do you want to address Loma Alta's inclusion?
Which ones were you referring to were not on the list?
Hidden Valley, Brookside, Manor, and Marin Stables were all higher on the list than Loma Alta.
And actually, we are recommending that Hidden Valley and Brookside, I think, move forward through the PEIR. They weren't on the table that we showed today, but they are up for consideration, I think, as part of the PEIR, because they would provide some protection, not as much as San Domenico, but they could provide some detention along Sleepy Hollow.
Let's clarify that, because I'm reading. Yeah, they're not in 6.1, and they're not one of the ones that lists recommended sites for inclusion in the PEIR.
There's a note at the bottom of 6.1.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So there's a note that says, we'll also preserve the option to pursue 2 additional sites in the Sleepy Hollow Creek, Hidden Valley Elementary and Brookside Elementary School.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And the reason that we didn't want to move all of the sites forward, we looked at 32, and the whole purpose of our study was to try to narrow down the focus. And so the alternative 5 detention basins are the ones that we were moving forward. The reason that we added Loma Alta, even though it scored a little bit lower, it was kind of a backup, especially since it's more publicly owned. We're more likely to be able to move forward on that than some of the private property ones. So we tried to limit the amount of sites that we move forward in the PEIR, and we added Loma Alta as a backup.
Right, okay.
Oh, and Loma Alta also was by the flow target area up above Fairfax. It was the location.
It was also the location. That's another reason why it's included. Okay. And if I could ask, maybe one of the prior questions, if I could just direct this back to staff, and I don't know, Russ, if you're the right one, and we've discussed it at other meetings, but it's worth going over. Memorial Park, the cost estimate, some look at the higher cost and are asking for an explanation. Doug Kelly just kind of referred to part of it, I think, why there's a higher cost to that. Are you able to kind of outline or summarize kind of what those costs are and why somebody may look at that and say, well, why is that so expensive compared to some of the other ones?
Well, I don't have it right in front of me here, but I think part of the answer goes back to what Laura mentioned earlier about these estimates that are shown here were derived under different circumstances. And that particular estimate for Memorial Park was derived from a grant application where they had looked at the design in more detail and were able to identify in more detail what needed to be done than what was done by CH2M Hill for some of these other sites.
So there were additional elements to it as well, not just detention, but recreation and other parts to that, correct?
That's true. Yes, we are.
Daylighting the creek, yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes.
My name's Jody Holston. I live in downtown San Anselmo. And I was wondering, being this is going to take so long to fix, that I was wondering if you could take some of our tax-free money and clean out all the vegetation in the creek in the meantime. It seems like you have trees growing right in the middle of the creek. And if the creek stops up, we'll definitely get flooded.
Yeah, and I think we're actually there'll be a mention of that in an upcoming agenda item about creek cleanup. Yes, welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Frank Ager, 13 Meadowway, Fairfax. You have some good alternatives for fallback positions here. You know, Fairfax had 2 water catchment basins on the Fairfax Creek when the Christmas Day flood of 1955 occurred. Smith Lake, which was removed when Cannon Village was built in 1974, and the stock pond for Smith Ranch between Sir Francis Drake and Lima Road, where June Court and Village West are today. Village West was built in 1968. As we grapple with drought and water shortages, one of the advantages of the detention basins that can not only catch water but retain it for summer watering makes sense. Neither Lefty Gomez Field nor Memorial Park meets that criteria. I urge you to drop those two and replace them with detention basins that serve a dual purpose: flood control and water storage. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Steve Emery, San Anselmo. I was one of the petitioners for the initiative, so I just want to give some perspective on what that process was like and what the feeling in the community is. Tonight, you started out with the county director saying, we have to solve this, it cannot fail. That's not a prevailing attitude in the rest of the community. It may be here, I'm not claiming this, it's just out there. Another statement that was made tonight by the engineer is, I just want to build something. And that, there's also great resentment against that. No matter what it is, no matter how well designed and beautiful it is, Memorial Park in its current state is something that people can see and hold on to. And I know you've hired consultants to try and explain this engineered perspective to what all these proposals will mean, but the prevailing sentiment out there, at least in the San Anselmo community, is not that. It's not the engineered solution. So, and it also was not anything that we had to explain or lie about or give the worst case scenario to get people's signatures. It was overwhelming and unanimous. They don't want to see a compromise proposal. They just don't want it. They just don't want it there. I have a question about this process tonight. Some of the public has come up here and they've gotten answers to their questions, and others are not answered. Doug Kelly asked a question following up on Kathleen's question. Pine Mountain Tunnel was not designed to be a storage facility. It was designed and used, it never was used for this purpose, but it's to take it from one watershed to another. It's a continuous flow. If it has a limited amount of storage, that storage can keep going from one watershed into another. So I hope you looked at that. I rarely agree with Lise Torme, but I agree about how these are presented to the various property owners and the communities. It needs to be done sensitively and timely and allow everyone into the process. That's also what didn't happen with Memorial Park, and that's why there has been this initiative to take it off the table. So I would like to still follow up on Doug's question about whether it's 2 inches or 2 feet, because I know Memorial Park doesn't contribute 2 feet to the flooding. So I hope these other questions that you didn't answer or didn't choose to answer get answered. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further public comment? Welcome our supervisor, Katie Rice.
And also a Sleepy Hollow resident. So I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I think that this flow reduction study was a really important exercise to go through, more than an exercise. It helped us understand and evaluate the current set of solutions, detention basin sites, as well as the other measures. And it also allowed us to explore other potential sites. Are there alternatives? And I think as a result, we have some additional sites to be able to put on the table to give us some flexibility going forward. We don't have as many potential as we would have liked, I think, and it was disappointing to have San Domenico come off the list, but I think it's better that we know that sooner rather than later so that we're not including a site in a study that we don't have any potential to use down the road. I have read the flow reduction study. I thought it was very well done. It's very thorough. I think it does answer all the questions that have been raised tonight. And if staff will dig in there and get back to the people that didn't get their answers, I think we can do that, and that's important to do. I think we have a much clearer picture today than we had 6 months ago about both the watershed, the flooding problem, and our ability to deal with flooding that happens. There is a scope and scale to each of the proposed detention basins that we need to understand. We need to understand how they work together. And it's not as simple as 2 inches or 2 feet. It's about getting a mix of projects together that can reduce the flood levels overall. I'm pleased that we're going to be meeting with Ross Valley School District a little later this summer in order to get their affirmation on which sites in the school district, in addition to Lefty Gomez, they're willing to allow to keep considered as part of the programmatic EIR. If Hidden Valley and or Brookside stay on that list, that provides an option potentially for some protection for the Morningside area. And then finally, I want to say, as we're doing this, moving on this implementation group and the programmatic EIR, let's also remember we've got bridges going underway, in the running and moving. Phoenix Lake we want to keep moving. We need to get up to, I think, Sacramento. I need to get up to Sacramento and have a visit with our delegates up there, our representatives up there in the Division of Dams, if that's a holdup, and I will do that. And I think we need to do everything to expedite this program in the best way possible. And again, I think this flow reduction study was an excellent response to the community's need to know more about the project, understand alternatives, and make sure we had turned over every stone in terms of options. And a job well done, and thank you, CH2M Hill.
Great. Yeah. Okay, looks like that's it. Let's bring it back to the board for further discussion and comments. We have 2 items that are calling for action, one by the board, both by the board. One is to recommend approval to proceed with the programmatic EIR strategy to include the 9 potential, well, is it 8 detention sites, excluding San Domenico, that are defined in the flow reduction study. And the other action is to recommend approval of the implementation strategy that's defined in the report as well. And by implementation is to proceed with what is meant as proceed with discussions with homeowners, develop more planning level studies, cost estimate, conceptual designs, geotechnical studies, and the like, of the elements that were included in the top scoring program alternative 3, which was the most environmentally friendly one, which those are Phoenix Lake, former nursery site for Sunnyside, Lefty Gomez, Deer Park, and Memorial Park. And before we open it up for discussion, just so members of the public know, because there was a discussion about it, it's available online. Can you again tell us where can they get the entire report, including the cost estimates, Scott?
Sure.
Ross, yeah.
The report is available online if you go to www.rossvalleywatershed.org.
Org. Yeah. Okay.
I just have a link to it. So.
Great.
And then the appendices are also they're up there on that site as well. So.
Okay.
That includes the PowerPoint.
And did staff have anything else before we discuss
Yeah,
this?
I'd like to clarify the action items. So on the action item for the programmatic EIR strategy, there's actually 10 sites. The original 9 that I had mentioned didn't include the Brookside and Hidden Elementary school sites. And I wanted to clarify this. So that's 10 potential future detention basin sites, on the caveat that we still need to meet with the Board of Trustees of the Ross Valley School District in August to get their feedback on the elementary school sites, both Brookside, Hidden Valley, and also Deer Park.
Okay. And on that, so you're planning on meeting with the Ross Valley School District. Are we going to request that they take action in terms of, after hearing your report, to agree to vote to proceed as part of the programmatic EIR? What do you anticipate the action being?
I anticipate the action being similar to what we did for Lefty Gomez, to come up with a memorandum of understanding that we will proceed with feasibility studies on those sites.
Okay. Will we know that in August when you meet with them, whether they're agreeable to that, or is this something you're going to talk to them and then we'll develop it over several months and just work out something? Because I don't think that, I'll speak for David, I don't think David would support that, and I don't think anybody else would up here. So would we know in August whether or not they're on board with participating in the programmatic EIR?
Well, that'd be, obviously that's our goal, to make sure that we know, and we'll be inviting board members to that meeting so they can get a firsthand look at the discussion. So our goal is to get clear direction from them whether to proceed or not.
Okay. Yeah, I think, just so you know, I mean, sitting on some of these boards, you get comments and statements. Unless there's a vote on something, you know, you can't oftentimes tell what their position is. So I think it would be, again, at the risk of sounding like I'm speaking for everybody, I think we want to move it along and make sure we have sort of a definitive position of the Ross Valley School Board and on the different projects that are being proposed here, and if we're happy to work with you on that in terms of the communication with them. Okay. I'll open it up for further discussion on these. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I would like to ask that San Domenico not be excluded from this first action item, that you do go back to them. I think we heard tonight an example of how sometimes the message gets confused when the gentleman referred to a lake. The detention basin is not a lake. So I would like you to approach them again, make sure they understand the scope and the impact, and not exclude San Domenico at this time.
Okay. Other comments?
Yes.
Yeah, Sandy.
For purposes of comparison, the assumption was made that the 160 in-stream measures would be implemented. I haven't counted up, but let's say 20 of those are projects that are realistically right now moving forward. Bridges, the Corps of Engineers Units 3 and 4. The vast majority of those projects are on private property. And I think it's highly unlikely that anyone can succeed in getting most of those done. They come in batches, and if you try to get a project done that involves 8 or 10 private property owners, you're involved. It's a prodigiously difficult process. There's always someone who doesn't want anything done on his private property. So it's very unrealistic, except for purposes of comparison, to assume that all 160 in-stream flow measures are going to happen, because I don't think anyone in this room would live long enough to see private property owners come to an agreement to get them all done.
Other comments? I just have a couple of final things. With respect to San Domenico, I wouldn't support including them in the EIR just because I think they're private property owners, and I don't think we're in a position, or should we force them to participate if they don't want to. At the same time, I would, and I had some communication today with Gary Giacomini, and urge them to kind of reconsider their position and at least be open to having staff come to meet with their board, present in more detail what was being discussed, answer questions and the like, and not just shut the door to it now, because I think there's a potential for significant benefit, including with, because of the Sleepy Hollow Creek. And I don't think they have a lot of the information. What came back was, no, they had discussed it extensively, and basically they don't want any outside project at their school. Okay, certainly they're right. I would urge staff, though, to follow up and have further discussions, and I'm happy to have that as well. I think as part of, in a way of good faith, I wouldn't include them here, but if we were able to convince them otherwise, that it's not as threatening as it may have read to them in the Marin IJ, or from reading the initial reports, it's not as scary, that maybe they'd reconsider, and then we could come back and decide to include them later. So that's my initial comment on that. They're a private property owner, and we have little control over them. Yes, we should have probably had more extensive discussions with them earlier, but I don't think we should shut the door to that now. I do think that, and I'm glad we're including Hidden Valley in the options. I really think especially with San Domenico, effectively off the table, I agree that we should look at all potential significant options for the Sleepy Hollow watershed, and I think that's a potential. It could be multi-benefit for the school as well, for the ball fields and the like, that it may be helpful to them. So I think we should full steam ahead in terms of examining that and seeing the potential benefits. I have some real reservations about Brookside. I'm not an expert, but it doesn't seem to me to be all that feasible, but I'm open to at least discussing it and looking at it, but like I said, it doesn't seem all that feasible to me. And then the final thing is, if you're meeting with them, and why I was pressing on what kind of information or determination we'll get from the board, I'd like to see if we could come back maybe as a board, if the rest of the board was open to this in August, after you've met with them, get a report on how it went, what the determination is, and see and essentially have a check-in on this program to see where we are and see if there are other issues that we need to address, rather than waiting till the end of September, which is our next scheduled meeting was September 21. There's a lot of moving parts of this program, and I'd be in support of scheduling another meeting in August. I know it's hard for people because of summer vacations and the like, but if everybody else was open to it, I would certainly support that. I don't know hopefully, if anyone objects to the August, maybe you could circulate a doodle, which is a scheduling tool, online tool, and let's see if we can schedule maybe for shortly after you meet with the Ross Valley School District. Okay, Scott? Okay, with that said, so the two action items, should I just take them separately, I guess? The first item is recommending approval to proceed with the programmatic EIR to include 10 potential sites, basin sites as outlined. Is there a motion?
I move to do what you just said.
Okay. Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next item is to recommend approval of an implementation strategy as defined in the flow reduction study of the elements, including the top scoring program alternative 3. So that would be Phoenix Lake, the former nursery site, Lefty Gomez, Deer Park, and Memorial Park. Is there a motion?
I move to recommend approval.
Sandy's moved. She beat you to it, but would you like to second it? Okay. Rich seconds it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. And why don't we proceed, go on to the next item, which is we have various program updates, project status updates, and how this will work is staff will go through and list some, give information, we'll ask questions, and at the end of this, we'll take public comment on all the various things. So if there's a project anybody in the public has a question on, just wait till the end after he's done, and we'll take public comment at that time.
Thanks. I'll keep this real brief. The staff report is pretty comprehensive on all the project statuses. One project I'd like to just expound about a little bit more is the Center Boulevard Sycamore Bridge Avenue replacement project. We got the Board of Supervisors approval earlier today to continue with they authorized us to purchase the what I call the Acorn Building at Sycamore and Center Boulevard, and we'll proceed with that right away. I think the escrow is a 30-day escrow, so just wanted to bring that forward to the board.
Okay, great. Any questions on anything from board members? Any members of the public have comment on any of the project status updates that are outlined in the staff report? Steve.
Steve Lamb, San Anselmo. Regarding that Acorn building, there's a statement near the end of that particular section that says that at some point the town of San Anselmo would purchase the property, $900,000, and from the district or from the county, whoever does the first purchase. So I'm wondering where the town will get the money to do that.
Are you able to address that, Scott? Or
I
we also have our town manager here and public works director.
I just want to be clear that the $900,000 is a right-of-way acquisition, and that is fully reimbursable through Caltrans as part of the project. So they would be reimbursed by Caltrans for that building.
Okay. Okay, great. Looks like no further public comment. We'll move on to item 5, Ross Valley Creek Maintenance Update in incorporated and unincorporated areas. There was a question about this earlier, but.
Mano with Marin County Flood Control District, and I'm going to be giving the update on the creek maintenance. So some of the, starting with the incorporated areas, as was asked earlier, we are continuing the creek maintenance program this year, and although it wasn't shown in the staff report, there's about $30,000 that we allocate and set aside every year to fund a creek maintenance program within the incorporated areas. That includes all the towns and the city of Larkspur. So we've started actually doing some creek walks that are in coordination with each of the municipalities this month. And during those creek walks, we actually look at the conditions of the creek to see if there's a tree that might have fallen or some vegetation that should be removed. And sort of in response to that earlier comment, sometimes it does seem like there could be more vegetation that should be removed in the creek, but it turns out a lot of that is actually beneficial, because if you were to remove all the vegetation, you can get erosion issues that actually further restrict the creek flow. So there's sort of a process to go through to determine whether or not something should be cleared or not within the creek. And we also follow our routine maintenance agreement that sort of helps us determine what can be removed or not removed while still reducing flooding. So anyway, those creek walks have started in a lot of the municipalities this year, or this month, and we plan to have a meeting after the creek walks have been completed, and we kind of rank which sites we think need to be addressed this year, and then we continue to monitor sites that have been flagged in prior years or this year, so that we make sure we follow up on them in subsequent years. And then within unincorporated areas, we're continuing the biannual inspections with the Army Corps of Engineers Readiness Branch, and that consists of the completed portions of the Army Corps of Engineers Corte Madera Creek Channel project, which is from 101 approximately all the way up to College Avenue, and the fish ladder as well. It actually extends up to the fish ladder. So every 2 years the Army Corps comes and we walk with them to inspect the channel together, and they write up a report that we use to determine what needs to be done for the next inspection. And we're also continuing fire fuel reductions next to the earthen channel, upstream of Bon Air Road, and at other locations as well. We're also doing sediment removal, as we've done in prior years, within fish resting pools, within the concrete channel reaches of the Corte Madera Creek Channel. And we're looking this year at evaluating localized degradation of concrete surfaces within the concrete channel that were actually flagged during the last inspection with the Army Corps of Engineers. And lastly, we're working with the College of Marin regarding their proposed fence retrofit next to the Corte Madera Creek channel, concrete channel, and looking at making sure that it's going to properly fit with some of the proposed creek improvements through the Unit 3 and Unit 4 project designs.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Any public comment on that? All right. Seeing none. I think we're done. So we're adjourning. It says till September 21, but we're planning on meeting in August, and we'll publicize that date when we set the date. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Go Warriors.
How long to go?